Renee Kranz. Back in the studio with me today, actually never left. It's Father Zach Schaefbauer.
Wow.
We record these all at one time. When there's one person in here, there's no secret about that. Welcome back, Father Schaefbauer.
Thanks, Renee.
So last time we recorded with you, we talked about the 5 precepts of the faith. We talked a lot about the sacraments, kind of the cost of choosing to be a Catholic or a Christian even. So we wanted to pick up from there, and you wanted to start with the love of God and go into a different direction to figure out how do we actually live as a good Catholic, because I think we're all a little maybe not sure about that.
Yeah.
I love how he starts. Yeah.
So, think of any transition word here.
Right.
Well, it's just coming to my mind right now, but
Okay.
I've had a few friends challenge the whole notion of the precepts, saying
Okay.
that because I would argue they're sufficient in themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Some of these friends said to me, well, the 5 precepts are the bare minimum, they're insufficient in their own right.
Right.
There's a lot of issues, I think, with that. I don't need to get into it. But
Right.
the primary one is that it puts you higher than the church.
Oh, sure.
Right? You
Okay.
now think you know better than what the church says it needs to be done. And those are the requirements. And then the church, obviously, from there has a multitude of other things,
Yeah.
right? It's,
Yeah.
in a sense, infinite, because there's an infinite amount of good that can be done by
Yeah.
every single human person,
Yeah.
depending on what their free will chooses and
Yeah.
determines. So the church then includes things like the works of mercy,
Oh.
the spiritual corporal works of mercy, the Beatitudes of Christ, the precepts of the natural law, all the things that make you human,
Mhm.
right? Because God's grace, although given to you, doesn't just heal you instantly.
Right.
You have to also be human. You also have to move, in a sense, your mind and your heart, so that grace can move freely through you.
Mm-hmm.
And then you become yourself, right?
Yeah.
And so it's a long process, and that whole process is what we call holiness.
Okay.
Holiness.
Yes, Father, Father rocked my world before we started in saying, no, you can't be holy. And I'm like, what?
Yeah. Well, let's just clarify here.
Yes.
Even the saints in this life weren't necessarily holy in the strict sense of the word.
Sure.
Because holiness, our English word holiness, comes from an old English word, if I'm not mistaken. Any linguists out there might challenge this. But holiness comes from the old English word for wholeness.
Right. Okay.
So what is holiness?
Oh.
Anything that's not lacking in its whole.
Right.
So it's perfectly round.
Mhm.
It's all fulfilled. It's perfect, complete. All right. So no one's ever complete in this life since original
Right.
sin.
Right.
So even the saints aren't exactly holy
That makes
in the true
sense
sense
to me
of the term,
now.
right?
Yeah.
We're striving for holiness insofar as when I die, I'm hoping that I'm in the direction of the next life of fulfillment, right? Of complete, perfect happiness. But in the meantime, I'm still, as a human being, striving for perfection, completion, kind of like an acorn.
Yeah.
Acorns strive to become whole, that is, oak trees, to produce more acorns.
Mhm.
I, as a human being, as I grow as a mature adult, both in mind and in body, with the help of God's grace, I then bear more goodness, right?
Mhm.
That's the effect of holiness,
Mhm.
right? Goodness is diffusive of itself. Okay.
Right.
Anyways, so that whole life journey towards holiness can vary depending on the person.
Yeah.
That's why the church still gives those precepts and some of these fundamentals as a way of saying, here's what you need to do to keep grace flowing through your life.
Mhm.
And that is the spiritual life then, ultimately.
Right.
Is the maintaining of the sacramental system. Okay. So then, outside of that, people ask, well, then what else do I need to do?
Yeah.
Well, what does Christ say? We are to love God with our whole heart, mind, soul, and strength, and our neighbor as ourselves.
Yeah.
Right? It's the precept of love.
Yeah.
So love God above all things, and our neighbor as ourselves.
Yeah.
And this sounds good and can often be used as a platitude, right? I'm to put
Yeah.
God first. I'm
Right.
to love him above all things.
Right.
But I'll ask, what does it look like practically?
Yeah. I would ask that question too. What does that look like?
Because it on the one hand, it could be, well, if that's the case, then I ought to just go sit in a church and pray 24 hours a day.
Right.
Or I ought to not think about my job. I ought to just think about God.
Right.
Or I ought to only go help the poor and not take care of the family? Or like, why get married, right?
Right,
You know, like
right.
why? Because if I'm not going to get married in heaven, why get married in this life? Okay.
Right.
So there's a lot of questions develops into what I call a Christian nihilism. If you really hold to it in a literal understanding of what it means to love God above all things. But I would challenge that notion, or at least challenge it in the way of helping us understand how to practically live out the love of God.
Yeah. Yeah.
From a theological side of things.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's how it goes. When I say the phrase, I love God, as a theologian, I can challenge and question those three things. What do you mean by I? What do you mean by love? And what do you mean by God?
Okay.
We're not going to get into the first two,
Okay.
since we don't have more than 20 minutes.
Right.
We're going to look at the third part.
Okay.
What do you mean when you say God?
Right.
Well, both philosophy and theology tell us, for example, that God is goodness. He's
Right.
goodness itself, right? He's good. So that means that when I say the phrase, I love God, I am at the same time saying, I love goodness itself. Well, that's a completely different mindset now.
It is.
Right?
It is.
It's not as a vague, generic concept in my mind. It now is do the good.
Yeah.
To love God is to love goodness. And so from theology, then, we can arrive at a natural precept, which is that good is to be done and evil is to be avoided.
Done.
That's it.
And that's the show.
And then
I'm
people
kidding.
will say, well, there's so much good, or how do I know what good to do, right? That's where the life of virtue comes in, prudence, right? Determination. But just to kind of flesh out a little bit more of what I'm getting at here. We know from nature that it's good for a child to obey his parents.
Right.
Okay, a child cannot repay his parents what they gave him, which is life. Okay, so we would say that according to nature, it is good for a kid to be obedient to his parents. All right, so if the parents give the child a reasonable command and he follows it, who is he loving? Well, he's doing something good, and he's loving his parents and God.
Right. Right.
If he disobeys that command, that reasonable command, out of selfishness, whatever it may be, we would say he is not loving his parents, therefore also not doing the good, and therefore not loving God.
Right.
Okay. Or think something that's very evident in my life right now as a priest at Holy Spirit. I've got a bazillion weddings.
A bazillion. Oh, I bet you do. Yeah.
Not as much as the cathedral, right? Like
Right,
Father
right.
Morgan's got me beat there. But you know, it's one of the things I ask the spouses, or the soon-to-be spouses. You know, how is it that you can love God above all things and at the same time love your spouse above all things? Seems like there's a contradiction there.
Yeah.
But if we follow this whole notion of that God is good and that God is not on the same plane of reality as I am, he's not competing with me.
Right.
Right. Then what I tell them is, in marriage, when you make those vows, your entire salvation is now bound up in those vows, which means then to love your spouse is to love God.
Right.
To be faithful to your spouse is to be faithful to God.
Right.
Okay, so then to go against the vows of your marriage is to go against God.
Right.
Right. So we go back, kind of what we talked about in our last session, is there's this active participation.
Yeah.
That God has given us the goods of the earth as a way of participating in his life, in his love, and in his own goodness. And it's a way to help us form the goodness of our minds and of our hearts. So really, how do you love God above all things? You love the good and avoid the evil first and foremost.
Yeah.
And what do you do from there? Well, then you grow in virtue. You find, like, what's my particular path in life? What have I chosen to do? What job am I doing? Am I doing it well? Right? I'll tell the high school guys, I'll say, listen, loving God is also needing me to play basketball, right? Not needing, but you know what I mean by that. Okay.
Yep.
Like if I play the game of basketball because I have the time to, at this, let's say maybe on like a Friday morning, then to play the game of basketball with my whole heart, my whole mind, without selfishness, without fear, without anxiety, without pride, loves not only the game of basketball, but I'm loving God because it's a good thing.
Yeah.
If I play basketball and it takes me away from my Sunday obligation, now I've used a good thing and caused disorder. I've taken things out of order.
Right.
I've missed an obligation to go to Mass instead of playing basketball.
Right.
But if I go to Mass on Sunday, which is a good thing, and I fulfill the obligation, which is a good thing, then if I have the time, I can go play basketball so long as it didn't take me away from the other good things of life.
Right. Right.
You get the point there.
Yeah.
So then it becomes a balance, becomes a whole system of prudence, of justice, of fortitude, of courage, and then with theology of faith, hope, and love.
Yeah.
Of learning how to love the good and avoid the evil.
Yeah. So this actually makes more sense when, okay, so we always think about we have to take our Sunday into Monday. We're gonna go to work, and maybe you love your job. Maybe your job is just okay. But what you're telling us is that we can love God and be good Catholics, good Christians, and actually do the things that help us get to heaven by just doing our job really well.
Yeah, by doing the ordinary, right? And that's I like to point out when Christ was on earth, right? When he was conceived in the womb of the Virgin, if we were to compare his life to our lives of quote-unquote discipleship of Christians, we're called to imitate Christ. Well, what do we notice? We notice that Christ is on earth for, we say, 30 to 33 years, but he spent, let's say 33 years, just for simplicity's sake.
Yeah.
He spent the first 30 years of his life doing what?
Obeying his parents.
Carpentry,
Yeah.
living the Jewish life, living in society. How many people died or were not healed or were not converted during those 30 years?
Oh, gosh.
Probably a lot.
Yeah. And he could have done all those
And he could have done all those things for 33 years. But what did he do? He lived the ordinary life, and then for 3 years culminated in salvation, right? That was the moment that his time had come.
Yeah.
Right? If we reflect on that in our own lives, it's this. God actually, first and foremost, affirmed the ordinary because he's basically saying to us, I've created it for this purpose. This is why the world exists. This is why you exist, is to do the ordinary. And if I need you to do the extraordinary, right, to enter into the realm of salvation in a more intense way, I will let you know when the time has come. But until then, live the ordinary the same way I have.
Yeah.
Right? And so salvation isn't too complicated. Salvation is nothing other than taking the grace received from the sacraments into the ordinary things of life.
Yeah.
And this goes all the way back to the ancient world.
Yeah.
There's an ancient letter written to this man named Diognetus. We don't know who the author was, but I think it was written in the 200s, so the 3rd century.
Okay.
And in there, this author is explaining to Diognetus what it is that distinguishes Christians from everybody else.
Okay.
And he points out right away, it's a fascinating letter. If you want to look it up, you can find it anywhere online. It's pretty easy to find. He points out that Christians, they are like everybody else. They don't dress differently. They don't sound differently. They don't have a different language. They attend all the various things. They get married. They rear children. They do all that. But then he says, I love these lines. He says that Christians share a common table but not a common bed.
Okay.
Right? The idea there is they don't commit adultery.
Right.
Right?
Oh,
They don't enter into the ancient world of,
that was
of orgies and stuff,
yes,
right? Yep.
Yes.
The next line, they give birth to children like everybody else, but do not abort their children, right? So the list goes on and on. That the two things three things I would argue, but the three things that separate Christians from the rest of the world are the works of mercy, the sacraments, and the idea that they're preparing for death, right? That they don't sin,
right?
Otherwise, we look like everybody else, and we're supposed to, because that's what it means to be human.
Yeah.
And Christ came to make us human again,
Yeah.
fully. And so we take the grace of the sacraments into our daily lives, and we just live. I don't have to be thinking about God explicitly. I don't have to be praying explicitly all the time. I do that in moments to keep me focused on the true and the good. But when I enter wholeheartedly into the job that's in front of me, to the kids who are in front of me, to the game that's in front of me, to the prayer that's in front, whatever it is, when I enter wholeheartedly into it without sin, I'm entering into the life of God in a sense. Right?
Yeah. So when you hear I don't remember, maybe it's Paul, I don't remember who says this, but to pray without ceasing.
Yeah.
This is kind of what he means. Is that right?
Right. Praying without ceasing, if I could quote my favorite theologian, St. Thomas Aquinas, who says, prayer is the uplifting of the mind to God. Well, that's a very generic statement, but the idea is he's trying to encompass all aspects of prayer,
right?
Which is nothing other than keeping the mind on God, who is truth and goodness.
Right.
So that's what it means to pray without ceasing, is to live a life free of sin.
Right.
St. Ambrose says that back in the 4th century. St. Venerable Bede says that to pray without ceasing is to pray the prayers of the church, which is the liturgy of the hours and the Mass.
Right.
Right. think it's St. Ambrose, maybe St. Hilary also says something along the lines of to pray always is to avoid sin. Anyways, but prayer isn't necessarily just praying Hail Marys and the Our Father
Right.
or sitting in a chapel. Prayer is pursuing and maintaining and loving the true and the good.
Right. That makes it seem so much more simple.
Simple, not easy. Simple.
Right. And so there was a kind of personal story you told me earlier about a maybe not super new convert, but somewhat new convert.
Oh yeah.
Who talked about how it was so much easier, or you always hear the Catholic guilt and the difficulty.
Yeah, all the things we have to do as Catholics.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember. So I had a parishioner when I went out to eat with him and his wife with a buddy of mine, and he brought up in one of in the midst of our conversation, he and this gentleman he's a recent convert to Catholicism. He's been, I think, 3 or 4 years now, and comes from a very fundamentalist Christian background, very devout Baptist family.
Yep.
And he said to me and my friend, he said, Father, what's been the biggest surprise to me about being Catholic is how relaxed I feel.
That's just so funny.
And I was like, okay, can you explain? And he fleshed out what I've kind of thought about in my own mind about what it means to strive for holiness. But he said, as a Baptist, there weren't as many laws and rules as there is in Catholicism, but I didn't have assurance.
Yeah.
It was all on me
Yeah.
to figure out whether or not I was in the good graces of God. So I had to constantly be reading the Bible or doing these things in order to know that, oh, well, maybe I'm in God's love right now. Maybe I'm in his good graces. Right. He said, but when I became Catholic, there was more rules, more laws, if you will, to follow, more things to believe. He said, but I had assurance. I had a certitude.
Yeah.
He said, I knew I was in the good graces of God because I went to confession. And I kept going to Mass on Sundays. And I followed the laws and the beliefs of the church. And then after that, I could do whatever I want.
Right.
Without doing my best to avoid sin, of course.
Right.
He said, now I'm actually feeling like I'm living in the love of God because I'm allowed to enter into everything else in my life rather than figure out whether or not I'm in his graces.
Yeah.
And I was like, can I just record that?
Did.
Nice. Okay, great. Good call.
Well, what's interesting about that is that, so what you're describing to me is they sometimes describe the church as a fence around a playground. So you have a complete enclosed fence, but maybe what he was feeling in his former faith was a fence that had lots of holes in it where you could kind of go out
or no fence at all.
Or no
right?
fence at all, yes. Or maybe just one side of a fence,
Yeah, so the analogy there, right, that the fence surrounding the playground, if you're only focused on the fence, it can seem restrictive and stuff, but the idea is that the children can play safely and know that there's no harm going to get them, and freely, right, within the bounds. I would also use just to appeal to the modern mind, the idea of a sport, football or basketball, right? Why did the out-of-bounds line exist? It's to keep me in the game, right? And I can choose not to follow the out-of-bounds line. I can choose not to stay in bounds, but don't expect to play the game.
Right.
Like the idea is those rules help me develop into the perfect athlete, right? The athlete who has a perfection in his game, a completeness to his game. So that's how I generally present the rules of the church to people, is to say, we're not here to restrain you or to restrict you. We're here to show you what the bounds are so that you can be truly free. That you can actually live without needing to worry about whether or not I'm doing the right thing or the wrong thing.
Yeah. Well, you can kind of think about that too, like if you're not a sports person. I always think about, not because I bake, because I don't, but baking has very specific rules. Even the act of creating music. Like there are certain rules within that you kind of have to follow to a degree. So
everything in life has rules. Like that's the thing. It's why is it all of a sudden with faith? The thing that's supposed to make us human. Like
that's
why
such a good point.
Why would that not have rules?
Yeah.
And then if it has rules, the question then is, where do I find those rules?
Right.
And there's two sources. If you say the Bible, I'm just going to get you back to the same source of number 2, which is that's the church, right? If there isn't a physical governing body to express to me the method and the path on which I am to follow, then I have no idea where the rules are.
Right.
Because the scripture comes from the church. Let's
Yeah.
just face it. I'm going to just point that point blank. We can maybe
Yes.
do another episode on
Yeah, I was going to say
where
on
the Bible
authority
comes
maybe
from.
because that's
Right.
always a big one.
Yeah. But it just boils down to everything in humanity, everything in nature, right? Acorns follow the law of oak trees. Right? That's how they develop into oak trees. Is they maintain a certain rhythm and an obedience, if you will, to their natural functions,
Yeah.
their natural pattern. Everything in human society has rules.
Yeah.
And if faith is the perfection of humanity, why in the world would faith not have rules?
Yeah.
And if it has rules, there must be a governing body to help us understand and
Yes.
determine those rules.
Yes.
And that's why the church exists.
Yeah. That's a great way to explain it. I know a lot of people do have the problem with authority, so that might be another conversation for another day. Authority. Oh, that's just a small little conversation.
It's a tiny one. Unreal.
Father, you did great. I hope that those things are helpful to people because I think it is sometimes a little like unnerving. You're just not really sure. Am I doing everything? How do I live this life? I know for me, those things are really helpful. So
Yeah, and if I could stress
Yes.
one last thing there
Yes.
too, it's when we talk about perfection, holiness, the life of virtue, we're not expecting you to be free of sin. Right. And that can maybe that's a hesitancy some people have is that, oh wow, this path of Christianity just seems almost like almost puritanical, right? This idea that I need to be perfect in order to follow
yourself
Christ.
up.
It's like
Yeah.
no, it's following Christ that eventually makes you perfect.
Mm-hmm.
But we're not expecting you to be free of sin. We're just expecting you to be repenting when you do sin, right? Because the idea is Christ came to save you, and He came to have mercy on you and to show you true love.
Right.
So, my final pitch here is to say, to be Catholic is to be human.
Yeah.
And to be truly human is to be Catholic. And we embrace all things in Catholicism.
Yeah.
Right? You name it. So we're not taking you away from the world. We're showing you how to live in the world properly.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great way to end. Thank you, Father Schaefbauer, for spending some time with us and helping us understand how the church helps us live good lives. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Renee. Yeah, it's good to be back on.
Yeah, you bet. All right. If you want to find out anything about the diocese or are looking to find our podcasts and so on, you can always find those at the website at sfcatholic.org. That's it for us today. Hope you'll join us again next week for more Catholic Views.